Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Before we take up today's analysis, let us take a moment to wish every civil servant in the country a happy Civil Services Day. Every year, the 21st of April is commemorated as the National Civil Services Day because it was on this day that India's first Home Minister Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel delivered a historic speech to the first batch of probationary officers while inaugurating the All India services. This historic speech was delivered by Sardar Patel at Metcalfe House, where the then training academy was located. And in this speech, he called upon the civil servants to shed their colonial legacy and commit themselves towards the cause of the nation. It was during this speech that he popularly referred to civil servants as the steel frame of India. Since 2006, the 21st of April is being celebrated as the Civil Services Day, and it is an occasion for all of us to recognize the immense contribution that civil servants are making across the country. It is also an occasion for the civil servants to renew their commitment and dedication towards the nation and its constitutional ideals. And also on this occasion, the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration is given out to recognize exemplary work in the field of public administration. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with an editorial from page number 6. This editorial analyzes the decision of the Government of India to ban foreign direct investments under the automatic route that are coming from neighboring countries which share a land border with India. If you look at the countries that share a land border with India, we have Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar and China. So by looking at this group of countries, we can clearly say that this policy decision to ban FDI from neighboring countries has been aimed at curbing the flow of FDI specifically from China. The objective of this policy is to prevent Chinese companies and Chinese investors from exploiting the current weak economic situation and to prevent their hostile takeovers or opportunistic takeovers of Indian companies. See, the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown have had a significant impact on the Indian economy and as well as on the global economy. And as a result, the valuations of most of the major Indian companies has fallen, and the fear of the Indian government is that this weak economic situation could be exploited by Chinese investors who have sufficient capital to take over these distressed companies which are in desperate need of cash. In fact, it is not just India which is concerned about Chinese investors and hostile takeovers, because similar concerns have been expressed by a number of countries around the world, including the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Australia, etc. And countries such as Italy, Spain, France and Australia have already taken similar action in order to prevent hostile takeovers of their companies by Chinese investors who are looking to exploit the current weak economic situation. On similar lines, India has also decided to ban foreign direct investments under the automatic route that are coming from neighboring countries that share a land border with India. Now let us evaluate whether this decision of the Government of India was justified. See, over the last 5 years, the flow of Chinese FDI into the Indian economy has increased significantly. According to a think tank, the current investment and planned investment by Chinese entities in Indian companies stands at more than $26 billion. Over the last few years, Chinese investors have picked up a stake not just in a number of major Indian industries, but also in a number of Indian startups. This steady flow of Chinese FDI has always been a cause of concern for the Indian government and as well as for a number of Western countries, because there is a very thin line that divides China's private investors and companies from the public sector units which are directly under the Chinese government. In a number of cases, it has been found that Chinese private investors and companies trace back a connection to its security establishment, that is the People's Liberation Army and its intelligence agencies. So this has always been a national security concern for India and the Western countries, and it has further added to their fears that their companies could be taken over by questionable Chinese private investors. So for quite some time now, India was looking to regulate the flow of FDI from China, and the COVID-19 pandemic and the threat of hostile takeovers has given the right excuse for the Indian government. So in this context, the editorial says that the decision of the Government of India to ban FDI from China under the automatic route is justified. But the editorial also says that India could have adopted a more nuanced approach while taking this decision. For example, India could have exempted greenfield investments from the ban, because greenfield investments refers to investments being made in a new project that is being built from scratch, and hence there is no threat of takeover. The threat of a hostile takeover exists only for brownfield projects which are already functional, and hence fresh investments such as greenfield investments could have been allowed. Because these fresh investments are very crucial for Indian companies to build their capacity and venture out into new businesses. Then second, India could have created a distinction between different class of investors, and it could have exempted VC funding or venture capital funds. Because VCs are not interested in taking over a company or in running a company on their own, and VC funding happens to be a crucial source of funding for Indian startups where cash burn happens to be very high. Then third, there is no clarity as to how Chinese investments coming in through the market route will be regulated. That is, investments coming in through foreign institutional investors. Because the current ban applies only for FDI and not for FIIs. Even though SEBI is keeping a close watch on such investments coming into the market route, the government has not given any clarity as to how these investments will be regulated. Then the final concern is that there is no clarity as to how the Indian government will regulate Chinese FDI coming in through third countries. For example, let's say a Chinese investor is routing FDI into India through a company based out of Singapore. In such cases, there is no clarity as to how the Indian government is going to regulate the flow of FDI. So in conclusion, the editorial says that the decision of the government of India to ban FDI from China is justified, but it advocates a more nuanced approach that would have addressed these four concerns. Next, in a related article on page number 8, it has been reported that the Chinese embassy has raised objection to the changes that India has made to its FDI policy, and it has said that these changes go against WTO principles. China has said that under WTO, member countries are expected to provide a free, fair, non-discriminatory, transparent, predictable and stable investment environment, but the FDI policy of India goes against these commitments. China has said that it has invested more than $8 billion in crucial sectors of the Indian economy such as telecom, infrastructure, automobile, etc. But this change in FDI policy might affect the future of Chinese investment in India. China has stated that it understands why foreign investment is prohibited in critical and strategic sectors such as defense, space, atomic energy, etc. But the concern of China is about the prohibition of FDI under the automatic route into other sectors where China has already made large investments. See, India's concerns about Chinese investments increased further after the People's Bank of China acquired a 1% stake in HDFC. With regard to these Indian concerns, China has said that investors and companies make decisions on the principle of free market economy and not on the basis of geopolitics. So the Chinese embassy has called upon India to revise these discriminatory practices and provide a free, open and equitable business environment as per the commitments made to the WTO. Now let's take up a column from page number 6 in which the writer argues that a disaster or a catastrophe tends to have a disproportionate impact on women. According to the writer, this is because of the traditional gender-based role of women in the society. For example, during the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, it was observed that the disaster had a disproportionate impact on women mainly because of their gender-defined roles. Since women are generally seen as the traditional caregiver in the family, they lack the required life-saving skills, and as a result, a relatively higher death count was registered amongst women during the tsunami. Then after the disaster, women who were rendered homeless were accommodated in relief camps, and it was observed that at these relief camps, women had to face abuse and molestation, and they even had to face hygiene and sanitation issues at these relief camps. Similar challenges have been faced by women in the United States as well, which is frequently hit by tornadoes. Similar challenges were noted during the 2018-19 floods of Kerala as well, where women were disproportionately affected, mainly because of their traditional role of being the caretaker of the family. The writer says that similar challenges are emerging during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. If you look at healthcare workers who are at the front line of our fight against COVID-19, a majority of them are women. According to data provided by the World Health Organization, more than 70% of the healthcare workers who are fighting against COVID-19 are women. Even in the case of India, it is the accredited social health activists or ASHA workers who are working at the ground level, and they are leading the contact tracing and isolation efforts of the government from the front. So this exposes more number of women to the risk of contracting the infection. Then the writer explains as to how the lockdown is also having a disproportionate impact on women. See, long periods of work from home and social isolation has significantly increased the household responsibilities for women, because in a patriarchal society, there is no equal division of labor within the household, and the added responsibility falls on women, which is a result of traditional gender-defined roles. Then we have also discussed over the past few weeks as to how the lockdown has resulted in an increase in the number of cases of domestic violence against women in India and as well as around the world. Along with this, the risk of losing their jobs and the added challenges being posed to pregnant women, menstruating women and menopausal women shows how the lockdown is having a disproportionate impact on women. In order to tackle these challenges, the writer is asking the government to provide adequate protection to the frontline healthcare workers, most of whom are women. She is asking the government to provide online counseling to couples and families in order to tackle domestic violence by involving NGOs, psychology students, volunteers, etc. She is also calling upon the government to set up dedicated helplines that are run by gender-inclusive teams, which can provide assistance to women during these difficult times. Now let's take up a column from page number 7, in which the writer evaluates India's airlift capabilities and the lead role of India in providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the region. See, airlift refers to the large-scale aerial transportation of people or cargo from one place to another, especially during times of crisis. For organizing such an airlift, you need both military and civilian assets, and it is considered to be a huge logistical challenge for any country. But over the years, India has acquired significant airlift capability, and it has displayed these capabilities time and again. Today, India is considered as the lead provider of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the region, and providing such HADR services has become an integral part of India's military diplomacy. This strategy of providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief is not only helping India to project its hard power in the region, but it is also helping India to project its soft power across the region. The latest display of India's airlift capabilities was when it evacuated thousands of its nationals from COVID-19 affected countries. During these evacuations, military assets of the Indian Air Force, such as the C-17 Globemaster, the C-130J Super Hercules, IL-76, etc. were used, and even civilian assets of Air India and other private carriers were effectively used by the Indian government. Then recently we spoke about a top secret evacuation that the Indian Air Force executed in Afghanistan. During this operation, the Indian Air Force made use of C-130J Super Hercules to evacuate Indian diplomats from a couple of Indian consulates due to increased security risk. Since the 1950s, India has made a name for itself in the region for providing such airlift capabilities to other friendly neighboring countries as well. It has provided HADR assistance to friendly neighboring countries such as Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal and Maldives whenever they were hit with natural disasters such as tsunamis, cyclones, earthquakes, etc. Globally, the Berlin airlift is seen as a gold standard with regard to organizing a complex air logistics campaign. During the Berlin airlift, around 2.3 million tons of load was transported into West Berlin in 1948-49. But the airlift that India organized during the Gulf War clearly overshadows the Berlin airlift as well. When Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait in 1990, nearly 1.5 lakh Indians had to be evacuated from Jordan, and the ability of India to organize this complex airlift established the credibility of India's air power. Since then, India has organized numerous such airlifts to evacuate its nationals who were stuck in conflict zones. Such evacuations have been carried out from Lebanon, Yemen, Libya, etc. On numerous occasions, India has provided HADR assistance to friendly countries across South Asia, across Indian Ocean region, and as well as across Asia. This airlift capability of India has made India the lead provider of HADR assistance in the region, and friendly countries rely upon this capability of India during times of crisis. The credit for this airlift capability of India should go to the farsightedness of India's military planners and strategic thinkers. Due to this, the Indian Air Force is able to operate a number of strategic military assets such as the IL-76, the C-17, C-130J, and a huge fleet of helicopters, and it deploys these military assets to execute complex airlift missions by working with the civilian airline sector. But considering the significance of airlift capability during disasters, and by considering its impact on diplomacy, India needs to start addressing the challenges that are being faced by the Indian Air Force. The Indian government and the Indian Air Force need to think of modernizing and expanding the aerial assets because aircraft such as IL-76 are old and outdated. And aircraft such as C-17 and the C-130J, they are meant to be used only for special operations. But their repeated usage in HADR operations could affect their effectiveness during special operations of the armed forces. Along with this, a large part of India's helicopter fleet is outdated, and hence there is an urgent need to modernize and expand India's aerial assets. Next, on page number 7, we have a column which evaluates the privacy and data security concerns that have been raised by the Aarogya Setu app. Just a few days ago, we spoke about the features of the Aarogya Setu app and as well as the privacy and data security concerns raised by it. See, the app is definitely an innovative tool for the government which will help in contact tracing by tracking the location data of the user. It is an example of how technology can help the government in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. India is one of the first countries to have launched such an app, and there is no doubt that it will help both the government and as well as the citizens. But the problem is, the application has raised a number of privacy and data security concerns, because since the app tracks the location data of the user and helps the government maintain surveillance, it has the potential to infringe upon the fundamental rights of the citizens. Even if you look at the privacy policy of the app, you will find that the provisions are very vague with regard to protecting one's privacy and data security. Legal experts believe that the application has the potential to violate right to privacy and right to movement of citizens. Yes, we can argue that compromising on these rights for a while is a small price that we have to pay in our fight against the pandemic. But one should also remember that our fight against the pandemic should not result in the violation of fundamental rights as well. The concern of legal experts is that how the location data will be stored and how will it be handled, and will accountability be fixed if the sensitive data is ever leaked into the public domain, or how will accountability be fixed if the data is misused within the government. So the answer to these questions are pretty vague in the privacy policy of the app, and the writers remind us that we do not have any data protection law which can secure these rights to the citizens. While acknowledging that such an application is very essential in our fight against the pandemic, the writers point out that it cannot result in the violation of fundamental rights. So they suggest that the application should be implemented through a law which secures the constitutional guarantee of fundamental rights. Now let's take up the practice questions. Braj Bhasha is mainly spoken in which state? Amongst the given options, option D is the correct answer. See, Braj Bhasha is a dialect of Hindi which is mainly spoken in Uttar Pradesh and as well as in a few parts of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana and Delhi. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 4. Braj Bhasha was a very important dialect a few centuries ago, and it was mainly spoken in areas in and around today's Uttar Pradesh. This region where Braj Bhasha was very popular has given us great poets like Surdas, Amir Khusro, etc. Even most of Bhakti poetry is in Braj Bhasha. During the current pandemic, folk artists are singing songs in the Braj Bhasha dialect in order to spread awareness about the disease. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? According to the rules of the Lok Sabha, the sittings of a parliamentary committee should be held within the precincts of the Parliament House. If it becomes necessary to change the place of sitting outside the Parliament House, the matter shall be referred to the Speaker, whose decision shall be final. Both the statements are correct. Option C is the right answer. This question has been asked because we have a related article on page number 8. According to this article, rule number 267 of the Lok Sabha mandates that the sitting of a parliamentary committee should be held within the precincts of the Parliament House. If it becomes necessary to change the place of sitting, then the matter has to be referred to the Speaker and his decision shall be final. As per this rule, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha has permitted the Parliamentary Panel on Information Technology to meet via video conferencing, considering the difficulties posed by the lockdown. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? Thalassemia is a contagious blood disorder that causes decreased hemoglobin production. It is most common among people of Italian, Greek, Middle Eastern, South Asian and African descent. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect. So option B is the right answer. See, thalassemia is not a contagious blood disorder. It is a genetic blood disorder that is inherited. This genetic disorder causes decreased hemoglobin production and the patients could suffer from severe anemia. And such patients will require frequent blood transfusion in order to supplement their hemoglobin levels. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, the lockdown is affecting the availability of blood in blood banks and hospitals, and this is posing a threat to thalasssemic patients who require frequent blood transfusion. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? The Unified Commanders Conference is an annual event chaired by the President of India. It is attended by the 3 service chiefs and senior officers of 3 services and the Defence Ministry, in addition to the Minister of State for Defence, the Chief of Defence Staff and the National Security Advisor. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect because the Unified Commanders Conference is chaired by the Defence Minister and not the President of India. So the correct answer is option B, 2 only. This question has been asked because we have an article on page number 11 which says that this year's Unified Commanders Conference has been postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2019 prelims paper. In the context of proposals to the use of hydrogen-enriched CNG as fuel for buses in public transport, consider the following statements. The main advantage of the use of HCNG is the elimination of carbon monoxide emissions. HCNG as fuel reduces carbon dioxide and hydrocarbon emissions. Hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. HCNG makes the fuel less expensive than CNG. Amongst the given statements, statement 1 and 4 are incorrect. See, the usage of HCNG in buses does not eliminate carbon monoxide emissions. It definitely reduces carbon monoxide emissions but does not eliminate them. And HCNG fuel is more expensive than CNG. So both statements 1 and 4 are incorrect. So the correct answer is option B, 2 and 3 only. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, recently, the Government of India banned foreign direct investments through the automatic route from neighboring countries that share a land border with India. Critically evaluate this policy decision. The second question, any disaster or catastrophe tends to have a disproportionate impact on women. Analyze. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post them in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.